Do these foreign companies, do they really want to hire Emiratis?
I am a global company. I have a strong brand back home. But here, Emiratis don't know me.
Would we never see an Emirati in the private sector?
There were Emiratis before the quotas, right?
No national should be allowed to work in the government sector until they first work in the private sector.
Talib Hashim, a distinguished expert in Emiratization. Talib has been at the forefront of this movement, advocating for sustainable employment strategies and fostering a deeper understanding of the Emirati workforce. His goal is to integrate Emirati nationals into the UAE's workforce, enriching the economy with local talent and perspectives.
You have strategic HR leaders thinking strategically like this to how do we fulfill our quota? How do we get numbers? It becomes a numbers game. Hey, it's okay to allow your young one to work in the private sector. Why am I hearing it from the government? Why don't I hear it from the private sector itself? They asked me, what are the challenges in the private sector? Tell us. And I said, the number one challenge, you know, is what? You.
Should Emiratization go beyond the UAE?
Wow, that's a huge question. The answer is
Talib, you're the Emiratization expert. But before we go into the Emiratization and everything else that the UAE's agenda has been super focused on, especially with trying to recruit the youth here, you know, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, and then how did you come to fall into such a lucrative industry and initiative from the government?
Thank you very much. So I fell into this industry by accident, really. I was just one of the UAE national job seekers, right? So I was unemployed. I've experienced unemployment when I graduated from high school, unemployed for a few years, young guy, fresh from public schooling, English good, not that great, no experience, one-page CV. I remember my page was one-page CV, struggled to get to 2 pages, and looking for jobs. We didn't have Monster, no LinkedIn.com, no Bait.com. It's just straightforward, carry your CVs, knock on doors. And the biggest challenge was the secretary or the PA at the door. So just to go bypass her and get your CV through, right?
It's always about the gatekeepers.
The gatekeepers.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So I experienced unemployment after high school, and then when I landed a bunch of odd jobs, worked as a timeshare salesman, worked as a magician at one point of time.
No way.
Yes.
I wish we had a set of cards here. I wish you had a deck of cards. You know, from what can you do a magic now? Do you have to have some props?
A long time. I was probably 20 years old at that time.
Okay.
Right? It was for Dubai Shopping Festival. It was the first version of Dubai Shopping Festival.
Yeah.
They needed a person who can promote the raffle draw and then do magic tricks, right? And it was in Hidden Away Mall in Dera, in Sabha, in Noom.
Yeah.
And I think that was my first experience of standing on stage and performing in front of a group of people looking at me weird. I had a hat, red waistcoat, and I was inviting people. The whole thing was I wanted people to come and buy raffle tickets.
Please tell me you have pictures of that.
No pictures. Whatever pictures were burnt. And
I wish, you know what, we'll probably get this edited. We'll tell them to get your face and put you on like a costume of somebody who was like a magician. And then now you're dressed like this doing Emiratization.
Yeah, from magician to Emiratization.
Yeah.
Well, not very far. Not very far.
Yeah.
But
both seem sort of like a difficult task to be doing, right?
Yeah, the commonality is people expect that I have a magic wand when job seekers who come to me and they think, right, I have the jobs and I can immediately create jobs for them. And I explain to them, no, it's a process. I'm not a magician. I used to be a magician back then, but not now. So from that, I did. I experienced unemployment, so I can relate to nationals and unemployed people in general. I experienced working in the private sector. Back then, when I started my company, the percentage of nationals was 0.65% of the total population of private sector.
Okay.
So I was one of the 0.65%.
Oh, okay.
working in the private sector.
Okay.
And then my last job was as a trader for a bank, a global bank.
Okay.
And that opened my horizon, because I started from the collections department, calling people, threatening to repossess their cars.
It's terrible.
Right? Yeah, I think now maybe I'm on the other end, but sometimes. but I've been there. Yeah. So I moved up from there to getting an opportunity to work in the trading or the treasury department.
Okay.
And I was the first Emirati who was a foreign exchange trader in the Treasury Association of the UAE.
Okay.
Not in the bank.
Okay.
So as a trader, I was the first one. But you had other people who worked in different departments.
Yeah.
So when you work in Treasury, it's great. It opens up your horizon. You work with diversity. I was the youngest person in the room. But it takes a toll on you. It's high stress, high pace. Your day is determined by red or green. You had a green day, you made profit, or a red day, and you're doing like 10 hours, 11 hours, always hooked in the market, right? And whatever happens So I realized after doing trading for 4 years that it was taking a mental toll on me. And back then there wasn't so much awareness about mental health and everything. It was just get by, just do your job, right? And we were paid really well.
Yeah.
But it took me being sent to Kuwait for me to realize that, wait a minute, I think it's time for me to move on from just working as a trader.
Yeah.
And I think because Kuwait was quieter, and there was a lot of time for me to think about my life. And that's why I created the first company. I set up the first company, or co-founded it. It was called Next Level, because I was thinking, you remember Next Level, right?
Yes,
The idea was, well, what's next level in my life? What's the next level in my life? Where do I take it to the next level? So we called it Next Level Consultancy, and then the rest is history. We started off recruiting, trying to do everything. We tried to say, right, we're going to do recruitment in general for all nationalities, all industries, and we're going to do culture. Culture meaning, you have international professionals coming, executives, business people. They want to understand about the culture, specifically when it relates to business, doing business.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a plan, right? Honestly. We just wanted to do everything. But 2 years later, we decided to reposition and focus on the niche of nationalization, of how do we help local youth or national youth find jobs. And it was because people were asking me, Talib, you're the first person, the first Emirati, or the only Emirati who was speaking to us, asking us about our inquiries, about our requirements. So can you help us find other Emiratis like you?
Yeah.
Can you help advise us? So
let me ask you this, Talib, on this question. Do these foreign companies, or let's say the private sector in general, as opposed to the public sector, do they really want to hire Emiratis? I mean, they do send out a lot of press releases, and they do say, yes, we want to hire this. They'll attend career fairs and put up big stands. But then a lot of people are also skeptical about their intentions.
Yeah, intentions and motivations. Yes, Look, to be fair, right? Some of them, there is a significant number that is interested, that really want to hire Emiratis, and there's also a number that doesn't want to hire Emiratis, and even the ones who do not want to hire, they are ones who are not motivated at all, do not intend or are not even considering to hire Emiratis. And if it's an option, they try to go around it.
And then let me ask you this: what about the ones that say, yes, we do have a certain percentage? Let's say they say we've got 10% of our workforce are Emiratis. Yeah. Is that truth?
Are they saying the truth?
Or did you just give a number like that to try to satisfy?
You do have some who are saying the truth, and you do have some who are just putting numbers. They make up numbers. I mean, look, if we take a step back, right? There's two versions of the stories, right? There is skepticism from Emiratis about working in the private sector.
Yeah.
And today when you look at social media, when you look at an Instagram post about Emiratization in the private sector, just read the comments below. 90% of the comments are unhappy or critical about why do we need to work in the private sector. So to me, that tells me something. It tells me there's fear of the private sector. And then at the same time, you have employers. The employers I speak with, there's some who really do want to hire Emiratis. They're divided. Some know how to do it, and a lot do not know how to do it or are approaching it the wrong way. So they're not setting themselves up for success. And then you have others who do not want to hire Emiratis. They want to avoid it in any way possible. Let's pay the fines. Let's avoid it. Let's pay salaries. Let them sit at home, and we don't care. And I have employees who come and tell me straight up. They tell me, we're better off paying the fines, maybe. You know?
Wow.
And it's not really. I can't fully blame them.
Yeah.
Again, our role, right? Because we sit between both, right? Private sector and job seekers. Remember the journey I told you?
Yeah.
I was on the side of the job seeker. I've
Yeah.
seen where they come from, right? As an unemployed person, and then working in the private sector, and then becoming a consultant working with private sector employers, right? So our responsibility or our role is to bring both views together. And the key thing is, the two factors that is affecting all of this is fear and perception. These are the two things that play a role. Fear and perception in everything. When it comes to attracting nationals, all the way to, I'm going to work with an Emirati, enabling them, giving accountability or responsibility.
So let me ask you this. If the government never came in and set quotas for the different industries, would we never see an Emirati in the private sector?
There were Emiratis before the quotas, right? There were Emiratis in the private sector. But again, the government, in different sectors, there were different policies. Like, for example, sometimes when you land a government contract, that government institution will require you to hire nationals. Then before the quotas, the latest quotas that came out, the government would require private sector, but there were no fines or quotas. There was basically, you would lose some of the benefits, right? So this question, I was posed this question before, and that was during a debate, should we force private sector to hire national or shouldn't we? My answer is, if the government tomorrow decides, right, no more nationalization quotas, employers, you're free to do what you want to do. Hire or don't hire, you don't lose any benefits.
Okay.
Visa, status, everything is cool. Would the private sector still continue to hire and be interested in hiring Emiratis? The answer is not really. With the exception of certain sectors. One sector that is a role model is the banking sector. So tomorrow if the government says the same thing about the banking sector, you'll find banks saying, thank you very much. We actually need the Emiratis that we have with us.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't you just break it down to us and tell us straight up, what are really the challenges of trying to recruit Emiratis in the private sector? What are people saying? These employers, they come to you and they say, yes, we want them, but here are our challenges. Please tell us those challenges.
First of all, intention.
Okay.
There has to be, we call it strategic intent. There has to be intention from the top saying, you have to hire Emiratis. We need to hire Emiratis.
Okay.
The line manager says, we need to hire Emiratis.
Okay.
And the recruiters and HR also sincerely say, right, we have a requirement for Emiratis. Let's look for Emiratis.
Okay, fine.
Right? So one, there has to be intention and intent. Second, perception is a big challenge.
Okay.
It's a huge challenge. The challenge means there are employers who, before even hiring an Emirati, if you put an Emirati civil engineer, right, and you put any other, a person from any other nationality, a civil engineer, to hire the civil engineer, the decision-making process, does he fit our profile, fit the salary? Good, we need him. But when it comes to Emiratis, there are other questions that come to mind. If we hire him, can we terminate him? How will he gel with the rest? These are real questions. Can we terminate him?
Wow.
Before even hiring? If he joins us, what if he demands, well, now he accepts the salary, but what in 2 to 3 years' time, he demands a managerial or a senior leader position, right? What if he's poached by another company? These are all questions that actually do not smoothen the process of hiring nationals. So there is, from the employer side, there's that. There's also not being able to approach nationalization the right way. That's one other challenge, right? Approach it the right way means, right, I am a global company. I have a strong brand back home. But here, Emiratis don't know me. They don't know what is the value that I can give to them for the future. What's my future with you as an organization, right? So they don't put an effort to communicate that, right? Another challenge I see a lot, or a trend I see a lot now, is with nationalization, and I did a series of podcasts called Emiratization and Its Unintended Consequences.
Okay.
So check out my To Be Honest podcast,
I like that.
by
Of
Talib
course.
Hashim.
Yes.
So I delve deep into it. And one challenge is experienced nationals seem to be sidelined for the sake of fulfilling quotas.
Yeah.
And that is almost like shooting ourselves in the foot as an organization, because you have organizations that complain and say, where are the qualified and experienced nationals? Where are the nationals who can add value to our business?
You know, Talib, I want to ask you this. Should Emiratization go beyond the UAE? Should companies like TBH Consulting be hired to try to recruit Emiratis in companies overseas? Would it be better to try to get, because there was
Emiratis or nationals?
No, Emiratis to go overseas and work and gain experience, not in the private sector overseas. I mean, we already know there's quite a number of UAE-based companies that are overseas. We know there's companies like Emaar, Nakhil, the rest of these companies, they all have a presence in the region and around the world, right?
Yes.
So beyond working in those companies, maybe they work at like some of these other bigger companies or even small companies, but overseas. Wouldn't that add more value to the skill sets that they would bring back home and in the companies over here?
Absolutely.
So that that way they learn also the skills of being more independent and have all of those things. Would that be maybe some sort of a solution? Because that way it will make these people even more global from a mindset perspective, a skills perspective, and everything else, even how they would be approached by the employers here.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, that one, Emiratis who want to work in a global organization, a lot of them are eager to be able to tap into that opportunity. If I apply for Microsoft, or the Emiratis apply for Microsoft, 5 out of 10 possibly are thinking, I want to gain global experience by working with Microsoft or SAP or PepsiCo or whatever these organizations, right? It's up to the organizations to actually structure a way and to understand, right, these nationals will actually add value to our business here today. They're here to stay. They know the market. They have the relationships. We are building long-term relationships by hiring them, right? So it makes sense for us to empower them by giving them and exposing them to the global experience that will really give them the skills, right?
Yeah.
Now, do all employers do that? Not necessarily. One thing we do is we have a solution called the accelerator, talent accelerators. And part of the talent accelerators is to give people the experience and the skills while they're working so that they can hit the ground running.
Yeah.
So these solutions are there. But here's the challenge. Here's my frustration, right? The minute the whole nationalization agenda or the quotas came into play, you have strategic HR leaders moving from thinking strategically like this to how do we fulfill our quota?
Yeah.
How do we get numbers? It becomes a numbers game. Instead of thinking creatively, instead of thinking strategically, like what you just suggested, is part of strategic HR, is part of development and accelerating leadership skills for nationals, right?
Yeah.
But this whole question of quota, I believe, we need the quotas.
Okay.
But the unintended consequence is that companies have become bogged down with the numbers game, making it transactional.
So let me tell you this. Obviously, we all know that one of the challenges that it comes to Emiratization is even sometimes it starts from home. A lot of the times, friends and family encourage their Emirati friends and family, whatever, not to go and work at the private sector. They say, no, go to the public sector because you get paid more, probably more holidays and everything else. So why put yourself through that if you can go the easy route, right? So for me, I feel like, is there enough work being done by the government to address this message to families of these young Emirati boys and girls who are graduating from school, to tell their parents, hey, you know what, these guys need to go into the private sector. It's much better for them. They learn more. It'll be better experience, etc. So do you think there's enough of that communication being done between the government and the guardians of these young graduates?
Yeah, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Here's the thing, right? The irony is, why does the government need to do it? Why, as a parent, why am I hearing it from the government or a government sector or a department that, hey, it's okay to allow your young one or your son or your daughter to work in the private sector? Immediately, it sends the opposite message, right? Why don't I hear it from the private sector itself? Why don't I hear it from other nationals working in the private sector? Because I've seen this conversation. What we do is we organize these mail lists, Emiratization mail lists. We bring employers and we bring young people. And we tell them, right, communicate, let's talk. What are your expectations, Mr. Employer? What are your expectations? Ahmed, Abdullah, Fatima, what are your expectations? What are the challenges, right? And at one point of time, we had a speaker speaking who's working in government, trying to make the case for nationals to work in the private sector. Immediately, the credibility went down among the nationals who were working, who just graduated. They say, well, you're working in the government sector, right? Why do you want us to work in the private sector? Why don't we have someone who's been there, who's done that, who's worked and thrived in the private sector, communicate this to us? That is more powerful.
Yeah.
So I think the government tries through awareness, but then this awareness, you can't artificially manufacture this.
That's true.
People want to hear real experience.
Yeah. You know, look, I'll tell you this, as much as for a lot of nationals, I know from the get-go, once they graduate, they want to get in the public sector because obviously there's also the question of prestige. You know, when you tell someone, yes, I work at this department or this ministry and this is my title, they feel like there's some kind of a weight to it, I think, because you're now on the side of the regulator. But one of my challenges, even with this idea, when I was working in the regulator, Talib, I used to always say that how can someone, fresh graduate, work in the public sector, be working in the field where they're responsible to issue policy for the private sector, but they've never even been in their shoes. They have to be in the private sector shoes to know the struggles and the pains and what they go through. I feel there should be a policy, if anything, to support Emiratization. No national should be allowed to work in the government sector until they first work in the private sector.
Wow.
For at least the first 5 to 10 years. At least 10 years.
And I'm getting goosebumps. You know why? Yeah. Because this is what I said 6 years ago. The whole idea of the accelerator program. So now we run it small scale for companies, for organizations, and for universities, right? But what we did, we had a conversation with a group of government stakeholders. This was 6-7 years ago, right? And we told them exactly word by word. They asked me the same question. What are the challenges in the private sector? Tell us. What are the challenges and what needs to happen? And they were all in the government sector. And I said, the number one challenge facing Emiratis joining the private sector, you know is what? Yeah, you. And they said, what? Us? I said, yeah, you. The fact that a job in the government sector exists as an option is the biggest challenge for nationals to join the private sector, right? Even when the government sector several points of time came out and communicated and said, we've reached saturation point. We don't have enough capacity to take in all, 13,000 university graduates, 13,000 graduates per year, right? We don't have capacity to take all of them. Yet the expectation from a lot of nationals, I want a job in the government sector. So what is the solution? The solution is exactly what you said. One, get in the private sector in a public-private partnership model. Tell the private sector, right, you're here with us. We want you to, as part of your commitment to us, is to incubate these nationals.
You know, I'll tell you this. I think there's other two factors when it comes. There's many things. We talked about the home. We talked about the environment. We talked about policy and everything else. But I think that, you know, let's look at education. Now, I'll take a country like India. Like when you think of India and some of the best talent that they generate from a school like IIT, right? Everybody knows you're going to get the best coders in the world when they come out from there. All the big companies in Silicon Valley and God knows what try to hire these programmers from that place. Even a lot of them now, if the salaries have become so attractive in India, they don't even want to leave India. It's become that. And by the way, IIT is actually going to set up a campus in Abu Dhabi.
Oh, wow.
IIT Delhi is setting up in Abu Dhabi. Like next year, as early as next year. So that's pretty cool. Okay, we know that. So do you think that there's enough that is being provided within the education system here in the UAE? Because I feel that's also a major gap. If you think of the UAE, I mean, we have so much of our resources, but what are the kids learning in school and what are they excelling at? Like you can't put your finger on which field they really are successful in. Could it be science? Could it be the arts? Could it be this? What are your thoughts on this? Is that something that comes up in your discussion? You, for yourself, Talib, you said earlier you did study mechanical engineering, I think? Or
no, I tried electrical engineering.
You tried electrical engineering,
and
but then you went
miserably.
back. And then you went to finance, which is not bad either. That's pretty cool. But I feel a lot of the people which I had met when I was working in the public sector, most of their resumes would say they went to university to study management. You know, to be honest, first of all, I want to know, why do they even teach management in university? How can you learn management academically? You have to be at management level to learn how to manage people. You have to be working around, and then you know, right? So what are your thoughts on the education system? Do you think it supports your goals?
Wow, that's a huge question. And what I know with the education system now, it is going changes at the moment with the minister right now and as well as the team. I know they're trying to play catch up as well with everything that is changing, right? Now, the education, now we have to be careful. I've been hearing from the private sector a lot. A lot of time when I talk about nationalization in general, they tell me, Talib, first of all, go fix your education system. First, fix your education system. And then we can talk about nationalization. So for me, it's an excuse. It is because fixing an education system is something that takes a decade at least, right? To fix it, right?
If not decades.
If not decades. So it's, while we're fixing it, what happens to the nationals who graduate? They sit on the sideline. What do? Do we continue training them, putting them in vocational training? No. So I think right now, the education system needs to play catch up. While it's going through the restructuring, needs to find small or short-term interventions or creative solutions that builds bridges with the world of work. Meaning, for example, mentorship. Do you know that there was a Khalifa Fund study that said 87% of the nationals don't have access to a mentor. There's no official structure of a mentor. There's no mentorship. They surveyed them. Do you have access to a mentor? No. The only type of mentorship is advice or peer pressure or influence. There's no mentorship, right? So there is an opportunity where you have someone like Omar, like me, or someone who's working in the private sector, right, to actually be able to extend that education process that national is going through, by giving them mentorship,
Yeah.
by giving them exposure to the world of work.
Yeah.
That's one way of doing it. Apprenticeship programs in another. There's so many ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Is the education system now designed to fit what's happening in the world of work today? Not 100%, but you need private sector to be involved.
Yeah.
You need the academia to come together.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Now, we're coming to the end of this episode, but I want to, of course, there's a lot more we can discuss, and probably there'll be more shows in the future. But I want to ask you this. Obviously, we've seen initiatives like NAFIS come out. We've seen so many other things that have been, the quotas is another thing, and a whole lot more policies. Where do you see is the opportunity for the government to intervene once again, to try to really support this? Or it doesn't have to be the government. What do you think needs to happen to really, put the question of Emiratisation like signed, sealed, and stamped and packed away somewhere else? Like, we don't have to discuss this as an issue anymore. What do you think should be that radical transformation?
There are a couple of things. One, the government needs to speak the language of the private sector.
Okay.
I said this before. What is the language of private sector? Money.
Okay.
Bottom line, profits. When they come here, they want to know, right, how are we tapping into opportunities over here?
Yeah.
So the conversation should shift from not only quotas, not only from Emiratisation as a CSR initiative, to how are we going to enable you, private sector company, to do business here and be sustainable and to be profitable if you are part of what we're doing.
That's amazing.
It could be even tax breaks.
Okay.
I'm not government, I don't
Yeah.
represent, but if I was in that room, I would say, you have an opportunity. You have corporate tax coming next year, right?
Yeah.
And you have an opportunity
Yeah.
to actually involve private sector and connect it with nationalization.
That's good.
That's
Okay.
that's one
That's one idea.
one way. So
Okay.
speak the language of the private sector. Second of all, the quota system today is not a qualitative quota system. It's very operational. It's very transactional. Give me numbers. We don't care how qualified they are. We don't care what they just give us numbers. And this is a recipe for disaster, because you have qualified, experienced nationals out there who might decide to be out of jobs, might decide to move jobs or are out of jobs and can't enter the job market. And these bring value, they bring talent, right? So what the government can do is, rather than do the quota system and the numbers, get us the numbers, they can reward nationalization in strategic levels. I mean, the same way they're doing with banks, for example,
Yeah.
right? That could be one solution to do that. And then, I think what needs to also happen is the government sector engaging people like us. I'm going to say it straightforward. Like, we have extensive, and there are a lot of us, right? They have opinions, they have views, they've worked with nationals. Bring them together. This could be a committee of advisors or mentors who become the eyes and ears of the government in the private sector, right? And it can also guide, because look, again, credibility, government speaking to private about hiring nationals in the private sector. That the credibility is not as strong as you'd want it to be, or whether it's from the perspective of the national job seeker or from the employer. This is a conversation I'm having with a person who's working in XYZ government department. But when you have that link, the people who actually can understand the private sector and the government sector and help facilitate it, I think that's one way.
Talib, thank you so much for joining Zeno Talks. We really appreciate your insights and wish you all the best with getting those locals hired in the private sector.
Thank you. It's not an easy job, but someone has to do it, like us, right? But thank you so much, Amar. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.